Right. Good morning, everybody. Happy Sunday. How y'all doing? What's up, Trail Dust? Shane Lalonde, Bor Tagov, Paul Orchard, Grandad's Forge, Jack Pines, and Dylan Corwin. How y'all doing? Good morning. Good morning. And of course, to all the lurkers out there, happy Sunday. If I didn't say that already, I think I did. Just getting all our ducks in a row. We've got some pictures to share for today's presentation. What's up, John? Don't forget you. Who are you? Sorry, I was a little bit late. I was reading an article about a Russian scientist and two-headed dogs and all that stuff. You know the longest two-headed dog created by Russian scientists lived 29 days, or the longest a two-headed dog from Russian scientists lived 29 days. So organ transplant experiments. Anyway, I feel we've got an exciting show for you guys today. And yeah, so we'll move into the how was your week real quick and get that out of the way. I know technically this is how was your 2 weeks for Adam. That's that's the way it goes. So how was your 2 weeks, Adam?
Well, as everyone knows, I work week on, week off. So 1 week was full of work. But this week, it's actually been, for those of you that may not know, I live in the tropical north of Australia. So it's monsoon season here at the moment. So imagine Florida in summer.
Yeah.
It's been hot. It's been sweaty. It has been constantly raining. We have had, for most of this week, I've had about between half a foot to a foot of water in my yard at any given time. It only stops raining near on constantly on Friday afternoon. And so I haven't been able to do anything. Like everything has been underwater here. So yeah, basically it's been me staring out my window longingly wanting to do anything. And finally, I got round to being able to attempt to do some yard work or do anything. And I've had to do maintenance because the throttle cable on my whipper snipper, I snapped it. And then my ride-on mower, I had to pull the carburetor off and clean that because my mower wouldn't start. And yeah, so it's kind of been a comedy of wouldn't say errors, but issues this week because I haven't done anything. I've been housebound because I can't even step outside out the front of my couldn't step out the front of my door without stepping into half a foot to a foot of water, and that's halfway up my shin. So yeah, unfortunately, that's the way it's been. It's now starting to dry out. We are on a downhill slope now out of the end of the out of wet season. We've still got another month and a half left of rainy weather. But as it goes towards the end of wet season, it still it starts getting less and less rain. So thankfully we haven't had, touch wood, haven't had a cyclone this year. Hopefully that staves off. Which is basically a hurricane that goes the opposite direction for you in the northern hemisphere. That's a cyclone.
Yeah.
But yes, we haven't had one this year, thankfully. It is El Nino. During El Nino we do generally get late cyclones. So we still may get one for the end of this month, early next month. But hopefully that stays away and we don't get too much of that. And I can get back into actually doing stuff in my workshop and finishing my bigger workshop. That's really what I am hanging on to do. So yeah, that's it. Nice and short. Alexis, how about you? How's your week been?
I believe it's pronounced El Nino. And
it's been good. I took my weekend off, and let's see, I got my shop clean, and then I built that yesterday. Finally got one finished. That's a 374 pounds of tempered 4140 forklift time. And I intentionally put the carriage bit on the upside, so I'd have kind of the curve, this bit right here, just so that
that's
kind of
actually
rounded.
not only that, but you can fit stuff inside of that to send like if you get a bit you can forge out to a bic, a bit of round steel that'll fit in there.
Oh yeah.
She's like, yeah, I got you. I'm gonna go show you it right now.
No, I got to start the truck, get it warming up because I got to take my daughter to work.
Right.
What's up, Bloobs? Ain't seen you in a hot minute.
Yeah, that was my week. I mean, yeah, not a lot to it other than cleaning and organizing and then getting that thing built. And oh shit, I left that up on the PC all night. All right. Yeah, that's my week. Loving it. Having a good time. I only worked one day last week though for 12 hours. Whew. Boy, I better be busy this coming week though. Lames, how was your week?
Well, work's picked up a bit, so been busy with that. We had a nasty windstorm, and I can't remember if it was last week or this week. Time kind of meshes with me right now. I'm so kind of scattered and busy and everything with stuff going on. But speaking of which, there's a relaunch that I have to promote later. Anyway, knocked one of my knocked a fence down, so I've got to get some posts and dig some new posts and put the new fence up, or put the old fence back up. I got I guess it's a wagon axle and wheels on my trailer that I need to pull off and store somewhere. Had a neat idea with the wagon wheels. It's two big wagon wheels. I might take some angle iron or something and make it into a fire pit, or at least like a fire cage to hold logs, and then just kind of neaten up our fire pit. But also I finally got an idea to rearrange my room. I just need to do some cleaning and move dresser, bookshelf and stuff, and then move my bed over, because I'm going to get a dinner table, so that when I have people over, because now that I have my brother and sister-in-law come over regularly, it'd be a place for them to sit and eat instead of us all sitting on the couch or on my bed, plates in our lap going, woo, hoo, hoo, hoo. So, that is going to be interesting. Also, I've got to get this lizard tank cleaned up and out of here. Still haven't done that yet. But aside from that, it's been pretty normal for me, so not much to report on the shop front. Bit too busy to get out there, so let me see, just checking the chat. And so I think that was the easiest, quickest. Usually we spend about half an hour hearing about what we did this week. And
nice and quick. We've had a boring one.
Yeah, very boring one. And again, hello to all the people logging in, all the lurkers and everybody. Looks like Alexis has got some technical difficulties with I know she's muted, and make your daughter be the camera person. Yeah. What is up? More people popping in the voice chat. KD9TDL. Hello. But yeah, so I suppose we could just mesh right into the topic of the week, which is do it DIY forges. And I had a thought while I was typing that out, while I was getting the pre-show ready to do DIY forges, like WYH, and then like that is a topic that I want to do, like share some like ridiculous attempts at forges around the world, or some ridiculous
Well,
forges.
whilst I'm rattling on, I'm sure that you know what I'm like. I can get on a roll, and while I'm doing that, we can always close out the today's segment on some ridiculous types of forges.
Yeah,
So,
I say everybody send pictures of the most ridiculous forge setups that you guys can think of, and we'll do a DIY forge segment at some point. We want to we'll do the same thing with anvils when we get to anvils. Like share your most ridiculous pictures. And we'll do or we'll do like a roast my setup kind of thing where you share your setup and we'll be like, why? Sounds like fun.
But it's all in good fun. There's no shame here, as long as you're smithing, that's all that matters.
Yeah.
So last week, of course, as for those of you that have joined us this week but not last week, Yamez and Alexis spoke about basic forges, your hole in the ground forge and all that type of thing. This week we're going to go a little bit more advanced into our home, more towards home built forges, or easy to build forges for those of you that are on a budget or have access to easy materials. So what we'll do, we'll start off with a J-bod forge, or just a box of dirt. Now this is a forge that is not new. It goes back centuries. It is the easiest style of forge, and I do this in quotations, a portable forge, in the sense that you can always disassemble it, move it, and reassemble it, which is something that I've actually done on my channel. I've got a video of me rebuilding my J-bod forge. Now, it's a versatile forge. It can be changed and rearranged to suit your needs, and can be as small as is practical up to my J-bod was 3 foot by 3 foot square. So I had a very large working table area, even though the forge pot itself, the fire pot, was relatively average. But we'll go into the details of how that's constructed, and also some other makeshift or self-constructed forges. So we'll start off with the J-bod forge. So if Yamez is able to bring up a little bit of a graphic that I've sent through to him.
Yeah, I'm working
so this
on
is
it.
actually this is actually I'm going to do a little bit of shameless self-promotion here. These pictures and stuff we're talking about is actually going into the book, and is actually in the book that I will be am releasing, which is the Blacksmith Companion. When I finish writing it, of course, I'm in the process of doing that at the moment. So, and this particularly first one, the J-bod forge, is actually the hand-drawn plan. I've hand-drawn this plan regarding this specific forge based on the one I built. So the J-bod forge is literally dirt cheap. In the sense of, I think when I built my J-bod forge, the only thing I actually spent money on was the black pipe and the bricks. The bricks were just clay bricks that I'd got from my local rubbish dump for I think they were 20 cents a piece. And I think I had about 8 or 9 of them. And the black pipe, I got about 3 foot for maybe $10. So the whole thing cost me under $15. The frame of it, of course, or the box itself, is a wooden box. I used a box that was about 300 millimeters, or about a foot.
Sorry,
about a foot deep. You're right. Yeah. So I used a box that was about 300 millimeters or about a foot deep. And as I said before, it was about originally it was about 3 by 3 foot or a meter by a meter. Now, as you can see with the plan, I had the tweer, the air pipe, about halfway into the box and about 3/4 of the way back. So that gave me plenty of table towards the front to actually use to rest things on. It gave me the right angles. Now, the most important thing with a J-Bod forge is the reason why the bricks are there is in order to prevent the heat from you're digging your fire pot too deep, and then it burning out the underside of your forge. It is literally a wooden box. You can pick them up from anywhere that does any sort of freight, and like car engine boxes. I think the one that I did actually had parts. I got it from the outside of a mechanic. They had parts sent to them in this box, and they were just throwing it away. So it was just a wooden freight box that you can get ubiquitous for shipping. And that's all I did. Grab that, and then for all intents and purposes, I filled it with dirt that was on my property. I just dug some dirt out of the ground and dumped it in there. Once I'd, of course, set the bricks up. The only other thing that you need to do is put a hole in the side wall of the box in order to fit your air pipe. Now, I'm sure last week Yamez and Alexis would have spoken about makeshift blowers like your hairdryer, shop vac, that type of thing. Hook that up to the end of the pipe, and that's it. Now, as I said, this is a side blast type of forge. It is kind of a middle ground between your bottom blast and your your pure side blast forges, in the sense of you do have a fire pot under with you put your solid fuel into, the air enters it, and then it, of course, heat rises. So as long as you're not running things full blast and blowing the coals out, it's really good. Now that can get up to welding temperature, all that type of thing. It is really, really a basic forge and really good for a beginner because it doesn't cost much. So like I said, if you can get these materials for free, if you have a bit of black pipe floating around, it's really easy to do. Now, at the bottom left-hand side of that picture, you can actually see the shape of the fire pot and how it was actually done. So it's about 6 inches deep. You can do a little bit shorter. I wouldn't recommend going any less than 4 inches.
For most guys, that's easy to measure, right?
Exactly. And then I wouldn't go any deeper than probably 7.5 inches, because then you're starting to just get you're wasting fuel trying to burn it up. But again, so you can see from that picture, I've got a couple of bricks. I had about 3 bricks laying flat, and then I had 2 or 3 bricks standing upright in order to provide some sort of wall for the tweer, but also to support the tweer when I was putting the dirt in. Now, when you put the dirt in, you pack it down relatively firm. You don't need to add water to it. It's just loose packed dirt, and then of course, or hard packed dirt but not wet. And then of course you dig out your fire pot. As long as it's about 1 inch below where your tweer is, and the bottom of the fire pot, that's for clinkers. That's for slag. When you're working with this type of dirt box forge, even if you're using charcoal, which doesn't generally produce slag, you will get slag simply because the temperatures in it get hot enough to melt the dirt and the silica in the dirt and any other impurities in the dirt, particularly if you have a very iron-rich soil in your area. We in the Northern Territory where I live, we do have very iron-rich soils. We have red dirt, red soils, which of course you only get red soils when it has a high iron oxide content in it. Basically, it's rust. So So those will melt/smelt and settle at the bottom of your forge. If you get too much, of course, it can actually build up and clog your tuer. And in the event of welding, just like any other forge, you do need to clear out that slag and clinker, because it will suck the heat and inhibit welding. It's also good practice in order to clear up, make sure your forges are clean before you try and do any forge welding.
Yeah.
So that's the first type of basic DIY forge. Really simple, really straightforward.
Question to keep
Go ahead,
that conversation going. Okay, so for obviously there's in different areas you have different soil types. For example, over here our ground is more sand than soil. It's like a sand dirt mix with a bit of clay in it. Now with that, when I did my even though it was just a literal temporary for one video hole in the ground forge, I noticed that even with just charcoal, when I was done, there was like a sheen of glass on it, and that's to be expected. Would you recommend, if you're in that area, getting a load of dirt or getting a bag of potting soil or something to mix in with it to increase it? Or do you think that something like that, it doesn't really matter? Just, little intricacies for the different areas that you're in, It
would look, if you were doing something that was like you said, just temporary, something to get you by, then I wouldn't bother. If it's something that, I used my J-Bod for about 2 years. So if it was something that, you thought was going to be a bit more permanent, a bit more long-term, that sort of thing, or if you were looking at lining, say you found and bought a portable forge, like a Buffalo portable forge or something like that, or you were lining a more professional self-built forge, then I'd probably recommend using something, getting something like vermiculite, clay or something like that, in order to, and of course, if you can afford it, in order to line that forge. Okay, again, don't really need to wet it down. If you do, very little water, just so you can pack it, because traditionally that's what forges were lined with.
Sure.
They were lined with clay, not fire clay, not any particular type of special clay. It was the best clay you could find in your area. Now, if you do have sandy soil, you are going to get, like you have as sandy soil with a bit of clay in it, very sandy. It is going to glassify, basically, because that's what sand does.
Yeah.
Particularly,
well, when I was
making
when I was researching, and this is for the record, it's like I do know a lot of these. I'm more asking the questions for those who would ask the questions, that can't right now. But yeah, I know that when I was doing some initial research way back in the day, I kept finding, a mixture of sand, clay, and ash to be used to make the adobe or adobe similar, something that would, hold up a little bit. And I also found that some people would put, horsehair or straw in the mix to help hold it together for early forges. And so I mean, with these do-it-yourself forges, you can literally do just a hole in the ground, a pile of dirt in a box that's raised up for comfort, or go all out and just mix, pull scoopfuls of what you have in your yard and mix it with other stuff to try and make it a little bit more substantial, but you'll achieve the same result of having that that excess slag or glassification if there's sandy soil.
Yeah, and it's actually the funny thing about the glassification or in the sandy soil is it's actually not necessarily a bad thing.
No,
particularly because glass is actually a relatively good insulator. So whilst it will melt, it will eventually pull towards the bottom. You do have to clean it out sometimes at the end of forging and stuff like that, over the course of you using the forge and stuff like that, even pure, even mostly pure clay will contain a little bit of sand, but that actually helps with the insulating properties of it. I mean, it will help contain heat to the fire pot more often than not. Again, you don't want to have, like, I wouldn't build a forge out of pure sand, because then of course you're losing a lot of the heat to turning the sand into glass. You do want to have a certain amount of soil and clay in that mixture, and with having
I know the chat
straw and
screwed you
stuff
up.
like that. Yeah, so having the hay and stuff in like that is generally used as a binder, but basically stop things from cracking and stuff like that. But in the building of these forges, if you pack the clay soil fairly well, then cracking is not really an issue. Cracking usually comes from when, again, and that's why I said don't use water, or don't use very much water. You don't want to wet it too much, is because generally cracking happens as a result of
Moisture.
The moisture being driven out of the forge when you're using it, and then because when things dry out, the water does take up volume, so it's the soil, the packed clay and whatnot is moving or shrinking after that water has evaporated. So if you use it dry, or with very, very little water as you pack it, then that's not going to be so much of an issue, because there's nothing or very little to evaporate, and therefore the clay or soil doesn't need to take up that space. And so Boar to go have said, Iron Age forges were made from loam, straw, and sand. That's true. But also part of the reason why Iron Age forges were made from those is because they were also built up. We're doing with a box of dirt forge. You have the box made out of timber generally. I would stay away from plastic. Don't try unless you've got a really, really large plastic box, and I'm talking over a foot deep and over 3 foot wide, because hot metal and plastic don't mix. But hot metal melts plastic very, very, very easily. But so whereas the ancient Iron Age forges and stuff like that, those were generally the straw and stuff like that was added to add a structural component to it, to make it more stable, to make it more permanent. It's just like when you're building a house out of earthen bricks and stuff like that, you add the straw and stuff like that is like reinforcement bar in concrete. It adds that certain amount of structural integrity to it. When it's just in a box, like a box of a J-Bod forge, you don't really need that structural integrity to it, because it's not structural. It's there to provide an insulating layer around the fire pit, and also give you a table to work on. I've seen J-Bod forges as little as a foot wide and a foot deep. They've been absolutely tiny. So, the larger ones, if you have the space, are great, because again, having that forge table and being able to put things on and keep your tools on and that type of thing is better. So if you look through history and stuff like that, they generally had larger forges because stuff was done on it. The large forge table means also with forge welding, you can put a small block, a small steel block on the J-Bod forge table, and use that for when you're welding, rather than losing heat and losing time and getting oxidization when you're taking things back to the anvil. It's that sort of that those considerations factor in. Of course, there is no one size fits all. These types of builds will you've got to take your own personal situation into account when your space and all that type of thing when it comes to building one of these. And if you've only got space for a small forge, build a small one. That's fine. And that moves on to the next design in just a minute. If no one else has got anything to say about JBods, Alexis, Yames, do you have anything to add? Anything to read from the chat?
I had a question. Would you? I kind of zoned out there for a minute. I'm not gonna lie. Yeah.
I drone on a bit.
Yeah. Right. Would you surmise that most JBods are side blast?
Yes. And that's why I said before about it. The JBod is kind of a hybrid side blast underblast, because a side blast forge generally pushes air into the side of the fuel, which and it doesn't really have a discernible fire pot when they're not filled. If you look at a lot of the old designs, they have a water filled tweer that punches out the side. They're generally rather large, and they you find kind of pile the fuel up over and around the tweer. At best, they're kind of, if you look at, particularly if you look at the old forge trays, they're not sitting down into the actual forge trays. They're kind of half the opening of the tweer is kind of half level with where you would fill it up. So whereas a JBod forge, you have a defined fire pot or fire pit, which blows the air into it, and then you've got 4 to 6 inches above where the tweer is, and that's where you lay your material and you have some fuel heaped over the top of it, more like an underblast forge or bottom blast forge that you typically come across. Now, that also ties into the next design in the sense of a JBod can also be a pure underblast forge. Now, Yamez, if you bring up the next picture,
Fine.
you kind of scrolled into it. If you kind of scrolled onto it earlier, this is another version of what would be a JBod forge. This was called a makeshift or wash basin forge. And it's practically the same thing, but instead of using a timber box, it used an old-fashioned tin wash basin. And rather than having the iron pipe come in just one side and have a bottom blast, they literally cut a slot or drilled holes in the pipe, ran the pipe all the way through, plugged the other end, and it would fill that with dirt, leave the fire pot, and it would become a bottom blast forge. So.
Cool.
Yeah.
This is kind of what I did with my first one, and I believe, and I haven't checked in a while, I believe if you go back to some of my earliest videos after the manatee fart video, but like my earliest forging videos, you see a brick and clay forge, and under that I literally took I didn't use a wash basin, I used a 55-gallon barrel that I had cut in half long ways, ran a pipe through it, drilled some holes in the pipe, filled it with rock, and then put sand on top of the rock. So basically it just brought air up through the sand, and it was like it was
yeah. So like and a similar type of thing it has been done for makeshift sword forges and all that type of thing. You can do it long ways. Like for those of you that have access to it, cutting the bottom off a 55-gallon drum, not long ways, just cutting the bottom off, makes a perfectly serviceable
wash basin.
Wash basin or base for this sort of forge. Then you've just got to drill the holes for the black pipe to go through. I do recommend using black pipe. Do not use galvanized. You can use galvanized. Just be aware that it's it can be dangerous with the off-gassing of the galvanization during the first few firings. Also, these pipes are designed to be replaceable. At the end of the day, these pipes will eventually burn out or get clogged with slag, particularly if you're using a bituminous or anthracite coal. You will have slag, you will have clinkers that can settle into these pipes and clog them up. But on that note, again, if you've got black pipe that's easy to come across, I don't recommend anything smaller than about 1.5 inches. Yeah, 1.5 inches is probably the smallest diameter that you want to use for the pipe. The wooden plug's easy to make. Shape down the end of a stick, shove it in. As long as it stops air coming out, it's all good. But this particular image says put a slot in the pipe. You can do that. You can put a couple of holes in it. You got to remember that the longer the area is that you have those holes in, the more air you have to push through that pipe, because it will be at higher pressure at one end and then lose pressure as it gets towards the other end. So one end of your forge will be hotter than the other end because the air you're forcing in will come out of the holes at the front faster than it will come out of the holes at the end. So if you particularly by having a centralized fire pot with a couple of holes or a slot in it, then that air is going to come out there as opposed to spreading over an area. But again, this type of the forge, again, very easy to maneuver about. I've seen one just like this that was basically put on a charcoal barbecue legs and screwed in, and that way that with the wheels they could actually wheel it around, move it into the corner of their workshop when they were, or their garage when they weren't using it, and wheel it out and put it in the driveway when they wanted to. And that also, helped with the airflow and make sure they didn't give themselves carbon monoxide or carbon dioxide poisoning or anything like that. But yeah, so really, really, really simple, basic designs, really cheap. If you have access to old wash tub or wash tub that may not be as watertight as it once was, cut off the bottom of a 44-gallon drum or something, or a 55-gallon drum for you in the US, 200-liter drum for those of you that use metric, most that may be in Canada or other parts of the world. They make a perfectly serviceable basin or tub for this type of thing. Raise it up to what is a comfortable height for you and forge on. That's basically it. These forges are really, really practical, really cheap, really fast to set up. If you know what, if you want, particularly after you've probably take you the longest time to do the first one. If you ever do any more after that, they're really quick to set up, and you can be forging the same day you build it, which is, I think, really convenient and really quick. You don't have to go waiting on parts. The only thing that you really need to worry about is your blower. Now, again, as we've discussed previously, as was discussed last week, your bouncy castle blowers, hair dryer with the heating element removed, a shop vac, anything that can force air into, even if you have those little hand bellows for fireplaces, at a pinch that will work too.
Now,
as long as you have something to blow in.
I will
Hey,
say,
I got
go ahead, Alexis.
real quick. So when you're talking about a hair dryer with the heating element removed, that's a tricky situation. Okay, so what I do is I buy, because I do use hair dryers. I use them because they fit right in the entry hole to my hand crank blower, so I can either hand crank or use the hair dryer. I buy the ones that have the button on them to turn the heat off, and then I wrap something, or either wrap something around it to hold the button down, or I'll open it up and either complete or break that circuit so that the heating element just doesn't come on. I did buy one time on accident because I mean, they're like $9 or $14 at the dollar store or something like that. I did buy one time, and I didn't notice that it did not have that option, and so I thought, oh, I'll just take it apart and take the heating element out of it. And I thought that was a very simple process. I mean, I looked at it, I mean, like, I'm not a stupid person, clip a wire here, clip a wire there. Okay, everything's good. This should work. I plugged it in, and it immediately caught on fire. So I obviously did not do something right, and I don't know what it was. But so be aware, if you're going to get inside a hairdryer that doesn't have that little cutoff switch, it can be tricky to remove the heating element and power the blower without, that was an issue that surprised me. And as I sit there and watch this pile of plastic smoking, I was like, guess I'm going back to the dollar store.
Bringing up a few things, a couple questions or a couple discussion points. Starting at the bottom, John Burnell says, does it really make a difference if the air is hot or cold with a hairdryer? I don't think so. I think it's just a matter. It's a matter of you would burn out the air source.
Cold air is denser. That's the only difference. There's more cold air contains more oxygen than hot or warm air. That's the only difference. Which is why which explains why, like, a turbocharged car has an intercooler, because the turbocharger, as it compresses the air, heats it up, and then it sends it through an intercooler to cool it back down, so that cold air is going into the engine and not hot air, because the cold air has more oxygen and you get better fuel burn.
Yeah. And for that, for the purposes of what we do, no, it doesn't really make a difference. But as Yamez was saying, it can burn out the hairdryer faster.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah. And Granddad's good point is you're also using quite a bit of electricity to run that heating element, probably more than what runs the fan.
That's correct.
Yeah, definitely. As an electrician, I will tell you, it's a matter a hairdryer, and you could look at the max amps on it and whatnot. The blower motor for a hairdryer probably pulls 1 amp, and the heating element probably pulls 8 amps, if not more, if it's an older one. So you're increasing your electrical usage by a factor of 8 for that one specific tool. Now, another point brought up as well for this barrel setup was air control and such. There's various ways with this setup that you can do it. Instead of using a slot, using several holes, and that would create a focused area. And then instead of a plug, you could literally do a gate or a ball valve or something, where you adjust on the end. You adjust how much, like if you're using an electric blower instead of a hand crank, and you don't have control over the volume of air, you can adjust the volume of air going through the holes by adjusting how much air escapes through the end of the pipe. In addition to that, if you have a solid cap on and don't want to use a gate, you can also drill holes or cut slots into the side by the blower, and then have a sleeve that covers those, and you can control it by sliding the sleeve up and down it so that some air escapes or no air escapes.
That's right.
So
that's right. And even as Crawford said, having a workaround for the air pressure being smaller holes close to the blower and larger further away. That is a workaround. But again, that's more for something like a long style forge, which is mainly used for, hardening and tempering swords. If you want a longer forge for getting that heat distribution for swords or long objects that you need to harden and temper. For all intents and purposes, for things that we do or most general blacksmiths do, you wouldn't need that sort of area or length in order to produce what we do. Even for most sword forging, you're working, even if you're doing long objects like that, you're working on a small area at a time. It's more for, and that's why I said when we were talking about it, it was more for a sword tempering forge and stuff like that, where you're running that blade in and out, and you want to get an even heat over a longer segment.
And with a
Which you
tempering,
can
with a tempering forge, you technically don't need to bring it to forging temperatures. So
Exactly.
you're not trying to get it to 2300 degrees. You're getting it to about 15 to 1900 degrees. To bring it up to a dull orange. Which you wouldn't
most.
really. Yeah. So it's like a tempering forge. It's actually that volume displacement over the length of it actually kind of works in your favor for the task at hand. But you bring up the point, when you're forging a sword, you're not, or forging something that's really long and bulky, when you're doing the forging process, you don't need the whole bar heated up. You just, just need the section that you're going to be working at the time heated up,
Yeah, exactly. And yeah, so it's not, and that's the reason why, particularly with these styles of forges, that the J-bod forge or the wash basin forge, those holes are centered around where you would put the fire pit. The wash basin forge is, of course, more akin to an underblast, because it does run through the bottom. You are providing that air directly underneath going up. So the depth of that fire pit is also very important. It must be a minimum of 5 to 6 inches deep, in order so that you have the fuel on top to absorb the oxygen, the air, to burn off that oxygen going through that fuel before it hits your material. Because of course, if you get oxygen, you get oxidization on your material, which then of course causes a lot more scale, and can actually, as most experienced smiths will know, can actually lead to burning your material a lot easier. So you want to have the depth of that fire pit or fire pot from where your tweer is. Now, of course, even with the wash basin forge, I do recommend about 1 inch or so underneath the tweer, so that any slag or whatnot that does happen during regular forging, or come from the side of the dirt or the clay that you put in there, can gather underneath and is less likely to block or provide any sort of a blockage for your tweer. And of course, if you intend on forge welding and stuff like that, that does have to be cleaned out. Over time, if you're using a charcoal as your fuel source, hardwood charcoal or even softwood charcoal, as long as not briquettes, that underneath that tweer will actually build up a layer of ash, which actually can help provide insulation and stuff like that, and also will help absorb any of the slag and stuff that does drip through as well. Makes things easier to clean out. But yeah, remember, at the end of every forging session, you should be cleaning out your forges anyway. A, for the conservation of fuel. B, because it makes life so much easier. We all get lazy. Sometimes we don't do it, understandably. But yeah, that's what happens. So that's Yama's on the left side of the screen just a moment ago. Actually, the fire pot, that's actually with the slide grate. That's a really good example of fire control for those that don't have a hand crank blower. That they can
and I made
air.
that in about 5 minutes.
So yeah, that's
this is my other shop.
Your other shop.
Yeah.
Yeah. So that's a really good example of a version of a air control device. But yeah, that's basically the presentation when it comes to DIY forges. Now, you're only really limited in this type of thing when it comes to your imagination. If you can find something that will contain the dirt or the clay or whatnot with a reasonable depth, and it doesn't matter if it's timber or steel, it could be or wash tub. I've seen examples made out of old sinks, old laundry tubs or old kitchen sinks. As long as they're stainless steel ones, of course, not plastic. Or I've seen them made out of concrete wash troughs. I've even seen examples made from old concrete culverts. And these were ones throughout history that were also used in technical trade schools and stuff like that. So it's not a matter of is this good enough or whatnot.
It's a matter of will it work?
Yeah, will it work? Will it hold the material in order to hold the fuel, in order to make it hot enough? There are stories. I have anecdotal evidence and articles dating back to the 1860s of people using these styles of forges for making money for their business. Because they've moved to a new area that needed a blacksmith, and they didn't have the free capital in order to buy a brand new forge or whatnot. Or
if you're out on the road,
exactly.
A great example. This is gonna sound ridiculous and stupid, but that whole need a tool, make a tool thing. I was on a job site, and it was middle of winter. It was way out in the middle of nowhere, and I needed a tiny screwdriver to connect the wires to a control panel for a septic system. And the way that the control panel was designed is the screw holes that for the contacts were about 3 inches into the contactors, and the flathead screw was about the size of a freaking pin. It was like eyeglasses, and I'm like, I have no screwdriver to fit this, so it's like, but I had some spring steel, what do they call it? The insulation clasps or insulation bars, where you put them up to hold insulation up in a crawl space. You always keep that on you, just in case you go in a crawl space and you need to move some insulation. Anyway, so it's like, what I did is, it's like, freaking, yeah, and looking back on it, I could have fucking just hit it anyway. But anyway, what I did was dug a small hole, put some wood in there, and lit it, and then blew on it. Get it nice. And I mean, I didn't have a air source, but just boom, because I just needed to heat up the very end of a small piece of steel, and then forged it nice and flat to the point where, like, I had to taper it down and flatten it, and then boom, and then I took a file from my boss's bags and filed it, made sure it was right, dipped it in the snow to quench it, and then it I just bent the end of it and screwed it in, and boom, happy.
Yep. And that's exactly like you said. Need a tool, make a tool. But and as I was saying, that pipe that goes through, particularly the wash basin tweer, that was actually one of the names for that is the California tweer, because it was something that they used ubiquitously on the mine sites of California during the Californian gold rush. So having something nice and easy to make like that was again, ubiquitous. Another example of if you don't have access to bellows or blowers or something like that, you can make what's called a bucket or pot bellows, which is basically some sort of airtight material over some sort of bucket, and the bucket has the pipe from the bottom. Bag bellows is another example. I won't go into too much of the construction of those here, but it's more, find a way, make a way. You are limited by your imagination on how to do things like this. Find some sort of base, find some sort of tweer. Like Yamo says, on the road, need a tool, make a tool. If you have an idea about, as long as you have some sort of basic idea about how these things are constructed, there is a relatively easy way to achieve it. It's not always, and it may not always be quick, but
It can get the job done.
Exactly, and remember the 3 points of necessity. Easy, fast, and cheap. Sometimes it's easy and fast, but it's not cheap. Sometimes it's cheap and easy, but it's not fast. Sometimes it's cheap and.
That's me in a nutshell. That's me in a nutshell. I'm easy, I'm fast, and I'm cheap.
But yeah, and if it's easy, fast, and cheap, then it's not going to be very good. But it just needs, sometimes you just need that type of thing to just get a job done. And
buy me a hot dog, tickle my ear, I'm yours.
That's it. You're good for just getting the job done, but not very well, Miz?
Yeah.
So yeah. So that's basically it when it comes to the DIY forges. All DIY forges of this sort of nature for J-bods and stuff like that all run on the same vein. There are, as we start getting into more home-built forges. Now, I do separate DIY forges from home-built forges personally, because DIY forges are relatively fast and relatively simplistic. Of course, when you start getting to the more of the home-built, then you're starting to move into more your permanent forges. And again, we're talking about something that's structural. You're looking at your stone or brick forges. Yeah, exactly. Your design, you're taking into account, your layout of your shop and how it's going to affect that sort of thing. Also, even if you're talking about more portable forges, you're talking about something that's more substantial in construction. So you've got to put more welding into it. You've got to put thought in, talking about, I think it was John Brunel's tweer that was brought up in the chat earlier. You're talking about welding, you're talking about designing, you're talking about, cutting and grinding and all that type of thing. A bit more substantial than just, something that will work to get that job done. DIY forges, of course, are still very useful if you do have a home-built forge that may not be big enough to do a specific job. A good example of that is I watched a documentary once about a group of smiths that were building a gate. And, it was a fairly ornate gate. I believe it may have been for a historical based sort of project. They were reconstructing something or whatnot. And inside the shop, they couldn't have the forge because the gates, they were putting the gates together, it wouldn't fit out the door, it wouldn't fit in the door. They didn't have enough floor space in the shop to actually do it. So they built they made a J-bod, or they built a forge out in their workshop yard, like a J-bod or a wash basin, in order to put this gate together. Now, they may have forged the elements inside, but of course, with riveting and peening and collaring and all that type of stuff, when you start putting a larger project together, you need the space. So they've actually done that outside. So this is another example of a DIY forge that may be useful for a job. Need a tool, make a tool type of thing. But they needed this tool to forge for that specific job. And then, of course, once they were done, they were able to knock it down and put the dirt back where they found it and recycle the other pieces, and it was all sweet. So, of course, consider that if you're doing a larger job, or you're doing a job where you don't usually work. You've traveled halfway across the country, and your friends want them to show them how you do blacksmithing. All right, well, I don't have a forge here, so quickly knock one together.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
All right. Well, that's about what we got for today. I'll do quick final thoughts, and yeah. I think Adam just filled the entire show with final thoughts.
I know. I'm like,
Alexis,
let's see.
Would you like to add anything?
Sure. for anybody that, I mean, like, okay, so most of the people, I'm pretty sure all of the people in this in this chat right now that are live have got a forge and whatever, and you just brought something up I hadn't thought about. When you travel or something like that, and you're across the country, say you're visiting family for Christmas break, you're going to be there for 3 or 4 days or whatever, and somebody asks you something about forging, you can be like, oh, you want to check it out? I mean, hold on, let me go knock something up real quick. And you could literally just build a J-Bot, a box of dirt forge, and in an hour or two, and be like, hey, Steve, go get your old lady's hair dryer real quick, bring it out here. I mean, you can literally knock something up real quick and then just show some people some shit they ain't ever seen.
All you need is your hand tools and some bar stock in your truck. You don't have to travel with your forge. You can, fire is, billions of years old. We can make it easily.
When I drive anywhere, I always have tongs and hammers in my pickup. I don't carry an anvil with me. I used to carry a vise because I used to have a vise attached to the hitch. I always had a vise on the hitch of my pickup. But I walked into that thing with my knees too many times, and finally I took it out and I threw it in the back of the truck, and it rolled around in the back of the truck for pert near about a year before I finally took it out. And guess what? I've never needed it. So, I mean, no big loss there. But no, I always carry tongs and hammers with me, not like a big selection, but, a couple pair of tongs and, usually just like one or two hammers, just in case I need them, because it really is inconvenient when you're like, oh man, I could just do this real quick if only I had my stuff.
Right. You always have your stuff with you. You just don't realize it. Yeah, I have.
Yeah, right.
I still have all the bar stock from Quad State in the back of my truck. Hell, there's still a pair of girls' shoes sitting in the back of the truck, and what looks like a shower cap. I don't know where that came from.
Oh, that's where that went, huh?
Yeah.
on that note, though, most people, and I say most with inverted commas, I've never come across a person in my direct friends group, even if they don't do blacksmithing, that doesn't have a hammer, right? It doesn't matter if that could be a claw hammer. The fact of the matter is, if you're not going to get a J-Bud forge in order to show them something, a claw hammer will suffice. But
if I'm doing just a real quick here, I'll show you. I'll get a shovel. I'll borrow a shovel, dig a hole in the ground, and do it with a yeah. I'm like, you got any pipe? No, but we could still do this.
And like I said, they might have a claw hammer, but most of them, most of my people I've come across generally have a ball peen or an engineer's hammer, which is a blacksmithing hammer. No matter what anyone tells you, like some people prefer to use cross peens, some people prefer to use turning hammers, whatnot. A ball peen, an engineer's hammer, is a blacksmithing hammer. That's where it came from. So, having one of those is perfectly fine to use. And the only thing which we'll cover in future episodes going forward is having something to strike on, having an anvil or anvil-like object. And we're not going to go into that today because that's going to be in an upcoming episode next month.
But so for my quick final thoughts, and I've been holding this one in for a bit, in honor of Alexis's video on drinking or taking a shot out of a $50,000 bottle of bourbon, today's coffee hot sauce was bourbon hot sauce that I dumped a little bit into my coffee. So I also did a shot of bourbon with my coffee. So cheers, clink. If you haven't watched it, nice explanation on where that $50,000 bottle of bourbon came from. So yeah, head on over to Transcendental Artist Studios and $1,000 shots. Everybody.
I'm gonna have to go watch that. That's the first time I've heard of it. So
yeah.
That was fun, and I thought about that for a long time.
I watched that video and I had a conversation with my brother and it's like I get that having it's like because you get something like that and you go, well, I'm gonna save this for a special occasion, and then you pass up on my kid was born, well, that's not special enough, I got married, well, that's not special enough, it's like nothing becomes good enough for that bottle, so fuck it, just crack it open and start swigging.
And it was just one of those situations. I mean, it was like the timing was right. I felt like I had an obligation, and the other stuff that I had wasn't really worthy of that. And I was just like, you know what? I think it's time, because at the end of the day, like I explained in the video, I was never going to sell it anyways. There was, I paid $72 for it. I mean, when it was brand new, I was never going to sell it. I mean, I was always eventually going to open it. And, I mean, like, shit. I mean, at the end of the day, what if I'm smoked in a car wreck tomorrow? I mean, and it's like, I'd be looking back at myself going, bitch, you should have drank that bourbon.
Right.
That's it.
But with that, it's like I'd like to thank everybody for hanging in there with us. And I know that the people in the live chat are all blacksmiths, but I mean, how many of you guys thought like, oh, I can't blacksmith while I'm on the road because, I don't have my stuff with me. I don't have my, $100 billion shop tools with me. It's like dig a hole, light a fire, and do it. Show your friends and do it. Don't sit there and wuss out. Oh, I can't do it. I don't know my blah, 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 blah. Just get out there and do it. No, I'm being mean for no reason. Don't do it. I mean, John finds every excuse in the book not to light a fire and forge. Right, Mr. Burnell? Mister, are you doing a show tonight? No, I'm not doing a show tonight. I'm too lazy. Yeah.
I'll put in there right quick, Daniel. No, that bottle of bourbon is actually the best bourbon I've ever had in my life. I explained that. I think that's why I never opened it. It's because I couldn't get another one. It's like once that bottle's open, there are no more. I mean, so
I think you said in the video there's 7 left.
Well, I don't know how many. I was just throwing a number out there. I don't know how many there are. I mean, there are a few still in existence, but not many. There were only 729 if there was no wastage out of the barrel. 729 bottles would have been made. But,
now, be interesting now that you've opened it to look that up and watch it. You find out that each bottle is worth like $3.3 million. There's only like 4 of them left, and they're $3.3 million each. And like, well, damn, I just took a $200,000 shot. It would matter to me. I would fly down there and choke you out. With that bottle even opened, you could open a bar and fund yourself for the first decade just by selling 1 shot a year.
It's only worth what someone will pay for.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah, I know, but it's also worth what you can market it for.
But it is so good, and it's not like I'm going to sit there just now. I mean, because literally, I could drink that whole bottle in one night, and I'm not gonna. I mean, like I'll stretch. I put it back in a safe, and it'll I'll stretch over the next probably 10 years.
All right. Well, with that, go check out that video. It's heartbreaking, but thank you all for showing up. I am starting to get messages rolling in from everybody who knows that I typically end the show around 11, and I gotta get to work now.
So before we go, don't forget you guys can find Alexis at Transcendental Artist Studios. That's where you can find that video on YouTube, Instagram, and TikTok. You can find me, Adam, at Speargrass Forge on YouTube, Instagram, and Facebook. And if you have any, and you can find Yames at YouTube, Facebook, and Instagram right here on Island Metal Forge. You can find if you have any suggestions for the Tool of the Week, Metal of the Week, or any other topic, you can leave it under the hashtag Metal of the Week in the YouTube community chat in Discord, or you can email us at impracticalblacksmiths@gmail.com. Yeah, as I can see your lips moving. If you found us on Spotify, Amazon, and Google Podcasts, we upload generally every Wednesday, or you can join us live every Sunday morning at 10 a.m. Eastern Standard Time in the US, and it's currently 12:30 a.m. Australian Central Standard Time, early Monday morning, like Sunday night. But check that against your local time, and that's at the Arla Metal Forge YouTube channel. Finally, thanks for joining us. Don't forget to hit that like and subscribe button. And if you're listening on the podcast, don't forget to give us a star rating. Share us with all your friends and family and other blacksmiths you may know. They might find something interesting, or at least join in the chit chat and give us a little bit of bargaining out. We've got fairly thick skins, and we do enjoy a little bit of a laugh. Again, thanks for joining us, and we'll catch us all next time.
Absolutely. I couldn't have said it better myself.
I can see in future you putting my audio on while you do the lip syncing.
All right, you guys have a wonderful day. Ooh, video challenge for all you video makers out there. Grab somebody else's audio and record your video, like record your version of their video, and then we'll do a blacksmith's lip syncing competition. Who can do the best lip syncing to somebody else's audio? All right, everybody. We're gonna go ahead and call that. Have a wonderful day. Adios.
Bye.
Bye.